SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation. SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation.
Comfort Moodian භාගයයි කලක් පවතින අලුත් පෙනුමයි.
Tonight, the big picture. The finance minister says that the IMF option remains on the table, but the government has other plans.
I am not totally rejecting it. What I am going to try to do with the people of this country to find a solution which don't depend on others. We must stand from our own strength.
Planning ahead, guidelines to be released next week to deal with the detection and quarantine of infected school children.
This will help the principals, zonal directors, the medical officer of health in the region to prevent spreading within the school.
No hikes allowed. State Ministry announces new regulatory prices for 60 essential drugs. Promises legal action for any overcharging of customers. A solemn memorial. The President unveiled Sri Lanka's second largest Buddhist stupa, the Sandahirusaya in Anuradhapura. All this and much more coming up on this Thursday, the 18th of November 2021.
Introducing New Hellmann's, the world's #1 mayonnaise brand, now in Sri Lanka.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I am Shanella Fernando in your top stories for tonight. The ceremonial consecration of the Sandahirusaya took place in Anuradhapura today under the auspices of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. The Sandahirusaya is a tribute to the war heroes who sacrificed their lives for the defense of our country against terrorism. Erected to immortalize the fallen war heroes who fought for the liberation of this country, Sandahirusaya was vested with the Mahasangha today. Held on the historic Ill Full Moon Poya Day, the landmark ceremony was presided over by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. Families of the deceased war heroes and military veterans too arrived at the stupa to witness the event. Commencing construction in 2010, the stupa is 283 feet in height and with a circumference of 801 feet. Sandahirusaya is now the second biggest stupa in the country, with its construction undertaken by personnel from the Tri-Forces. During the ceremony, the sacred pinnacle and the 3.5-foot crest gem of the stupa were also unveiled and consecrated before leaving it in the custodianship of the Mahasangha. The crest gem was placed at the pinnacle of the stupa after being on parade for public veneration. With the official unveiling of the pinnacle and the consecration of the stupa, the sacred site is now open for devotees.
Big 3.
Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa revealed his rationale behind this maiden budget on our current affairs program at Hyde Park with Indi Variyamuvatta, explaining that the radical measures promised in the lead-up to last Friday involved a reversal of previous budgetary trends, such as taxing those who can't afford to pay. Instead, he added that the budget has focused on those who can. Also touching on the sensitive subject of International Monetary Fund assistance to tide Sri Lanka's budgetary commitments, the finance minister stated that although the option remains on the table, the government plans to seek out a non-debt permanent solution.
In his first media interview since presenting his maiden budget last Friday, Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa touched on some of the most critical factors affecting Sri Lanka's economy. The most crucial of all being how he intends to deal with the country's raging budget deficit.
In the long term, as Finance Minister, what are you looking at? And we must also mention your maiden budget. You took office in July, and such a short period of time. At the same time, there's a long way ahead that you need to look at. So the question of budget deficit.
The first budget with deficit came from 1953. So from that day, every year the deficit was there. And last year, you mentioned about 8.8, this deficit I brought down. It was last year 11.1. In the external budget, that is the dollar budget, also has a deficit. That also not only because of COVID, it worsened during the COVID. And our trade deficit, we have tried to minimize by controlling some imports and increasing our export, but it don't matter because it's even we stop importing vehicles, our fuel bill is going up,
right,
because the energy cost in the world is going up, so automatically our bill is going up, so we didn't get much saving.
But simply asking you, is the economy in crisis?
There is a crisis. It's not a new one or new to Sri Lanka, only to Sri Lanka. It is worldwide one. And also Sri Lanka, it have been there for many years. So yes, I must say the situation is severe than the previous years. And if I have a good private sector to tax them and get more money to the government revenue, if they earn more, but it is not happening. And if the people have more money, then I can get that money and do some other deal. So that is not the situation.
Further, with expectations much higher than normal this time around, many people expected big changes in budget 2022. However, there have been some opinions expressed that it was somewhat underwhelming in its delivery of relief. However, the Finance Minister says that he believes that the budget has this time around hit the reverse gear in terms of who it takes from and who it gives back to.
You did promise a radical budget, but it seems that this is a little more conservative.
Radical means people thought, especially the opposition, I'm sorry about it, I couldn't please the opposition because they thought I will tax the people and put more and more taxes and try to get money, but I didn't do that. So they are not happy. In the other hand, I would like to give more to the people, but I didn't do that because I knew if I do that, the people will suffer again in long. So what have happened in the last several years, they have taken money from the majority people and give to small numbers of individuals. So I didn't want to do that. I did the opposite side. I tried to take money from who can afford to give money to the government and gave to the majority.
The other big question floating around these days is whether the government would shy away from International Monetary Fund intervention, which groups such as the opposition have been urging it to seek. The Finance Minister, however, while avoiding ruling out the option, says that his first choice right now is to seek out a more permanent solution involving non-debt sources.
Now, if we move on to talk a little about international funding agencies, our Cabinet Minister, Parliamentarian, they have been saying that from the government side, even yesterday we heard them say, even if we die, we will not go to the IMF, meaning that even if the economy fails, we will not reach out to the IMF. As Finance Minister, what have you got to say about that?
Yeah,
and how are we going to manage this external debt situation?
First, our government have cabinet of ministers also comprise various type of people and policies, parties. So they have different views regarding to go to IMF or not. There are views by various people. We should go to the IMF. Some people say no, we should not go to IMF.
What is your view?
I am very balanced. I am looking for all. Finally, we will take a collective decision measuring all these things. We have a policy. Number one, we will try to make this gap of the dollars which we earn and we spend. There is a huge gap. I want to bring it to a positive side in 2027. I have targeted, and I want to make it without getting more and more loans. Now most of our reserves which was there for many years are not our money. You have borrowed from another person. Like
but
that.
Shouldn't we go in for a restructuring plan? Isn't that the need of the hour now?
Yeah, that is also a thing which must be considered. I am not totally rejecting it, but there are certain views because this is not the first time we are going for the IMF. There are many countries have gone to IMF, and we have also gone to IMF several times. And have we found a solution, permanent solution? What I am going to try to do with the people of this country, and especially the investors, the chambers and the private sector jointly with the government, to find a solution which don't depend on others, whether it is IMF or World Bank or ADB or China or India. We must stand from our own strength.
Today marks the second anniversary of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's election as the 7th executive president of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, the occasion also coincides with the 76th birthday of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa today.
On the occasion of his 76th birthday, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa engaged in religious observances at the Abhayarama temple in Narayanpeta today. A special almsgiving ceremony was held at the temple premises to invoke blessings on the Prime Minister. Making his parliament debut in 1970 as the youngest parliamentarian at the time, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has held several prominent ministerial portfolios in his career, including in the Ministries of Labour and Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. In 2004, he was appointed the country's Prime Minister, and the following year he became its 5th executive president. During his first term as the president, he oversaw the end of the country's 30-year civil war, liberating the country from the shackles of terrorism. Despite losing the presidential election in 2015 after serving 2 terms as the president, Mahinda Rajapaksa was re-elected to the parliament by winning the highest preferential votes of any parliamentary candidate. Meanwhile, coinciding with the Premier's birthday, today also marks 2 years since the election of Gotabaya Rajapaksa as the president of this country. He garnered 52.25% of votes, equivalent to 6.9 million votes, to be elected as the 7th executive president of Sri Lanka.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa inspected the organic fertilizer packaging centres in Anuradhapura yesterday, managed by the Land Reform Commission. Inspecting the centres, he examined the quality of the manufactured fertilizers, which will be distributed among the country's farming community.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa inspected organic fertilizer packaging centres in Oemaduwa and Senanayaka Mawatha in Anuradhapura yesterday, managed by the Land Reform Commission. The Land Reform Commission produces organic fertilizer at 35 centres in the North Central Province using water hyacinth, Guinea poultry waste, dried dung and Epavala rock phosphate as raw materials. According to the President's Media Division, the Land Reform Commission expects to produce 50,000 metric tons of organic fertilizer by the Maha season. Fertilizer is packaged at 6 centres and handed over to the Commercial Fertilizers Limited, which will then be distributed to the farming community. Inspecting the centres, the head of state examined the quality of the manufactured fertilizers. The president was accompanied by Minister S.M. Chandrasena and several others during the inspection tours.
More news on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.
මිලියන 18.8 නිවස ලක්ෂ 5ක් ගෙවා දැන්ම වෙන් කරවා ගන්න මල්බෙරි රෙසිඩන්ස්.
Welcome back in more news. The institutional and legal frameworks of several ministries were amended by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa yesterday via an extraordinary gazette.
An extraordinary gazette notification was issued by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, amending the institutional and legal framework of several ministries. The gazette was issued yesterday by the President, exercising the powers vested under him in Articles 44.1, 45.1 and 47.1 AB. As such, the institutional and legal frameworks for the Presidential Secretariat National Priority Programme has been amended. Further, amendments were made with regard to the national security and disaster management, under which 17 departments, statutory institutions and public corporations have been listed. One of the changes made to the Treasury Affairs of the Ministry of Finance was that the department, such as the National Planning Department, has been removed and the Department of State Accounts has been included. In addition, The related institutions and legal framework of the Foreign Ministry, Ministry of Mass Media, and the State Ministry of Skills Development, Vocational Education, Research and Innovation have also been revised with effect from yesterday.
The Sri Lanka College of Pediatricians said today that by inculcating good health habits in children due to COVID-19 has reduced the chance for kids to contract other respiratory issues. Meanwhile, the Director General of Health Services said today that a detailed set of guidelines will be issued stating how to identify and quarantine COVID-infected students.
Sri Lanka's education sector, which suffered disruptions due to both the COVID-19 pandemic and the teacher principal trade union strikes, has resumed for grades 1 to 5 and grades 11 to 13. Earlier this week, the government announced plans to resume schools for grades 6 to 9 as well from next Monday. However, public adherence towards the health and safety guidelines has been seen to be deteriorating after reopening. This, health experts say, could be the reason for the rise in COVID cases in the country in the past week, including infections among students and teachers. As such, Director General of Health Services Dr. Asala Gunawardana said today that measures will be taken to identify infected students and quarantine them in the future.
Now we are going to issue a detailed circular regarding the case identification and how to do the quarantine or the testing in a school when a case was identified, and this will help the principals, zonal directors, our RDs, PDs, the medical officer of health in the region to prevent spreading within the school. As the UNICEF as well as the other researchers, what we have shown so far, they have clearly indicated that the school premises are more safer than their houses. Schools are to be the first to open and should close at last during the pandemic. So I earnestly request from all the parents, please send your children to the schools, and parents who are not immunized, please get your vaccine as soon as possible from the nearest MOH or the hospital, because you are at risk, and if you are at risk, you have a great chance to spread that disease to the children also. So then that children will go to school without noticing, and then you will give the disease from yourself to the children to the schools as well. So
meanwhile, studies carried out by the US Center for Disease Control has shown that following basic health guidelines to prevent contracting COVID-19 has been effective in preventing other illnesses as well. In particular, research shows that contraction of other respiratory diseases such as the common cold, seasonal flu, and influenza have been greatly reduced through the wearing of face masks.
අපි පැහැදිලිව දක්නට ලැබෙන දෙයක් තමයි මුකාවරණ පැළඳීම සහ සෞඛ්‍ය පුරුදු අනුගමනය කිරීම තුලින් අපි ඒ සිදු කරන්නේ මේ කොරෝනා රෝගයෙන් වැළැක්වීම සඳහා. නමුත් එමගින් නිතර දරුවන්ට වැළඳෙන ශ්වසනාබාධ අඩුවීමේ පැහැදිලි ප්‍රවණතාවයක් දක්නට ලැබෙනවා. මේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ පමණක් නෙවෙයි ලෝකෙ පුරාම විද්‍යාත්මක පරීක්ෂණ මගින් තහවුරු කරපු තත්ත්වයක්. ඊට අමතරව දරුවන් නිතර දෑත් පිරිසුදු කර ගැනීම, ඔවුන් නිතර මුඛය සහ නාසය ඇල්ලීම වැළැක්වීම වගේ දේවල් පුරුදු වීම තුලින් ඔවුන්ට නිතර සෑදෙන්න පුළුවන් මේ පාචන තත්ත්ව වගේ තත්ත්වත් පැහැදිලිව අඩුවීමේ හැකියාවක් තියෙනවා.
Meanwhile, the Vaccine and Infectious Diseases Forum of Sri Lanka today refuted claims made by Professor TISSA VITARANA, claiming that mRNA vaccines were harmful. In an article, Professor VITARANA stated that the Pfizer and Moderna mRNA vaccines aren't safe as they contain viable genetic material that leads to uncertainty over how it could combine with human genes. However, the Vaccine and Infectious Diseases Forum of Sri Lanka today assured the safety of the vaccines, saying that mRNA is not the same as DNA and it can't combine with human DNA to change our genetic code. They added that it is also relatively fragile, and once it is introduced into the cell, it will degrade within 72 hours.
Health experts are warning of a rapid rise in dengue fever cases following the monsoon rains that have led to major flooding in several districts. The Health Ministry has so far reported 16,042 people who have contracted the mosquito-borne viral disease this year, and warns that this situation could worsen as the rains and floods continue, with November already showing a surge in cases. Speaking to foreign media, community physician at the National Dengue Control Unit, Dr. Srilanti Senaviratna said that 2,195 new dengue cases were reported across Sri Lanka in the past 2 weeks, nearly double the rate during last year's monsoon period. Dr. Senaviratna explained that this was because of hundreds of mosquito breeding points having formed due to heavy heavy rains, with most of the infections recorded in the western province and in the BATTICALOA district. A high number of dengue cases has also been reported in the capital, Colombo. Special squads have also been set up by the municipality to check areas with stagnating water to prevent mosquito breeding points as well. The State Ministry of Pharmaceutical Production, Supply and Regulation has slapped regulatory maximum prices on a list of 60 essential medication with immediate effect. The ministry has warned that any attempts to charge consumers anything more than the new stipulated prices will result in legal action.
The State Ministry of Pharmaceutical Production, Supply and Regulation announced regulatory prices for 60 varieties of essential medications. Accordingly, a maximum retail price has been imposed on 131 types of 60 essential drugs. In a communique, Secretary to the State Ministry Dr. R.M.S.K. Ratnayaka stated that selling these medications above the maximum retail price is against the law. As such, the general public has been requested to inform the State Ministry of any contradictions in stipulated selling prices via the email address complaints@nmra.gov.lk. Drugs such as amoxicillin clavulanic used to treat certain infections caused by bacteria with a dosage of 156 milligrams must be sold not more than for 39 rupees and 28 cents, while the same medication with a dosage of 375 milligrams must be sold at 46 rupees and 35 cents. Other dosages of the drugs such as 625 milligrams must be sold at 78 rupees and 55 cents, while 1.2 grams must be sold for not more than 826 rupees and 17 cents. Further, the maximum price of 75 milligrams of aspirin has been stated as 3 rupees and 95 cents, while 100 grams of the drug cannot be sold exceeding 6 rupees and 94 cents. In addition, 500 milligrams of paracetamol has been priced at 1 rupee and 71 cents. Meanwhile, the 10 milligram vial of regular insulin must be sold for not more than 1,496 rupees and 35 cents, while its 3 milliliter cartridge has been priced at 748 rupees and 18 cents. According to the State Ministry, the maximum retail price stipulated for 500 milligrams of metformin is 5 rupees and 17 cents, while 500 grams of metformin sustained release has been priced at 10 rupees and 8 cents. The drug with a dosage of 850 milligrams has been priced at 9 rupees and 69 cents. In the meantime, 50 milligrams of thyroxine has been priced at 7 rupees and 98 cents, while 100 grams of it must be sold at 11 rupees and 92 cents.
In business news, Singapore Airlines is the latest to resume operations in Sri Lanka, which is known to be among the top airlines in the world. With the country's airspace opened for tourists, SIA resumed daily services between Colombo and Singapore yesterday, increasing flight frequencies to 7 times weekly from 5 weekly flights. After an 8-month-long wait, Sri Lanka opened up its airspace to facilitate the country's stricken tourism industry on the back of country's high vaccination rate and stabilizing case numbers. The country's tourism authorities have also launched promotions to attract travelers as well. So far, several international flights have now resumed operations to Sri Lanka, including Air France and Swiss International Airlines. With that, the latest to resume international flights to Sri Lanka is Singapore Airlines. According to an official announcement, the Singaporean national carrier not only resumed daily services yesterday, but also increased flights to 7 a week from its previous 5. Singapore Airlines operates Airbus A350-900 aircraft between Colombo and Singapore with 40 business class seats and 263 economy class seats. International flights are resumed as part of the island's efforts to fully reopen its borders to tourism. The Sri Lankan Tourist Board are all set to launch programs targeting the country's biggest tourist markets such as the UK, Germany, France and India for the upcoming holiday travel season. Countries in Europe and also Russia have been reporting a spike in cases which have prompted them to resort to new restrictions. With the holiday season coming up, this means that hopes of normal life have been put on the back burner once again.
Bars and restaurants in Spain's low-cost resort in Benidorm were packed with heavy tourists yesterday, enjoying the good weather they can hardly find at home at this year of the time. Local health authorities decided to install a mobile vaccination point for foreigners on Benidorm's busiest street after a spike in COVID cases in recent weeks. Spain's infection rate, as measured over the preceding 14 days, has been rising steadily since late October. It rose to 96 per 100,000 on Wednesday, from about 89 on Tuesday, though remains well below in some countries like Austria with over 1,400 cases per 100,000, or the Netherlands with 900. Spain reported 6,667 cases yesterday, bringing the total to 5,067,712,000. Spain reported 6,667 cases yesterday, bringing the total to 5,067,712 since the pandemic began, while the number of deaths rose to 30 to an overall 87,775. Russia reported 1,211 deaths from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, close to an all-time high of 1,241 reported last week, as well as 38,420 new coronavirus cases. Most of Russia's 80-plus regions lifted a week-long workplace shutdown at the beginning of last week that were designed to curb a surge in case numbers. By imposing new restrictions, the authorities try to speed up a slow vaccination campaign at a time when only about 40% of Russians are fully vaccinated. Shop owners at Munich's Christmas market were seen taking down their wooden stalls on Wednesday as the city's government announced the seasonal attraction must close amid an increase in COVID-19 cases. Stall owners were given approval to set up their small business booths in Munich's Marienplatz only a few days prior, but are now being told that the whole market is being cancelled due to the epidemic. However, private markets that can hold the checks required to ensure every person entering is either vaccinated or newly recovered will still be allowed to operate and open as planned on Monday. Munich's renowned Christmas markets normally draw in around 3 million local and foreign visitors who come to savor mulled wine and nibble on roasted chestnuts while shopping for seasonal trinkets among clusters of wooden chalets.
With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanella Fernando. Have a